Okay, colleagues, I would propose to start in the interest of time. Today we will be presenting to all of you the PMS API technology, and we will be giving a training to you on how to register to PMS API, how to request a role, how to connect to the application, and how to navigate through it. So, as I was mentioning, I'm here presenting the training to you, but I'm also doing so with my colleagues Marcos Fernandez Gomez, the PMS product co-owner at the agency, and also with Andre Edu, sport architect, also at the agencies. So just to give you a brief overview of what we are going, which kind of topics we're going to touch today. I will give you an overview on the roles that you can request to access the PMS API and a bit overview of the elements, data elements that we have been able to migrate and you will be able to see also in PMS API. Right after, Andre will give you a short demo on how to access the PMS API, how to query the system, how to look for products, and how to read this information. And Marcos will provide you the rest of the information, particularly related to the next steps and also other key important details that we would like to share with you today. There will be also 20 minutes for question and answers. The moderator will be Katerina. And then there will be the closing section as usual for every webinar. To start, as you may know already or have heard also, this section is always recorded and it will be made available through the EMA corporate website and also on the EMA official channel in YouTube. If you have any questions, of course, we will be giving you the possibility to submit any question or any input you may have via the usual tool. The tool is called Slido. And if you want to interact with us, of course, you can either do anonymously, but also if you want to, you can also show your name and surname. And by doing that, you, of course, give your consent to process your personal data. If you want to have a look of the PMA data privacy statements of Slido, there is always the link that we usually publish along with the presentation for you to have access. Few important points on how to request any question or any input via Slido. Here you have a QR code, the hashtag is PMS API. As usual, you can join by the QR code, or you can also type slido.com and include the hashtag that has been created specifically for this webinar. You can not only submit your question, you can also vote the question, and we will be doing our best to answer the most voted ones first. If you are submitting a question, please make sure that there are no duplicates. So this will streamline the way we can process them and reply to you. We will do our best to reply in write, but also verbally, because we have 20 minutes. And in case of high volume of question or there is any specific assistance that you are seeking from us, we will be doing our best, as I said, to reply in written, but also we are thinking to create an FAQ document, so most of the time you will be seeing this information reported there. If you have any specific incidents or question to asking us to investigate on an issue that you are experiencing, either is related to the tools or to the accesses, we might ask you to raise a ticket via service desk. This is because we can adequately investigate. Having said that, as I mentioned, the goal of today's webinar is to give you an overview of the PMS API, to clarify to you how you can request the access. We already noticed few companies, industry companies, they already accessed PMS API, and this is making us very happy about that. And we didn't receive many tickets about it, but I will guide you through how you should be requesting correctly the access. Then my colleague Andre will demo to you how to read the data through the API and also how to connect. and Marcos will tell you the next steps that we are looking forwards on the specific matter of the PMS API. Starting from the overview and how to access the PMS API. So as you may know, as of the 3rd of July this year, so literally a week ago, the PMS team released the PMS API for industry users. You can now access more than 4,500 centrally authorized products and more than 4,000 of national authorized products. Of course, you have access to authorized data, not investigational medicinal products. You can have access as a read-only mode, and the types of system that you can access up to date is basically via the PMS API and PMS PUI for industry only, while for the regulators or NCA competent authorities or the general publics, the PMS data can be accessible via the product user interface. The release systems up to today are there for the product user interface hosted in the PLM portal and the application programming interface, the so-called API, accessible for NIHs only at the moment. The next release that we plan is about releasing the API access to national competent authority. Instead, as I mentioned, just to give you a bit of recap, the API is the second tool that we have been able to release. As you know, as of 31st of May, one of the big milestones for us was also to release the access to the product user interface. So let's say you had the chance, kind of 1 month, let's say, to start practicing and getting used on how the data looks like, how they are structured in ISO/DMP compatible model, and now you can also access non-CAPs in addition to the CAPs via the API. So these are the two big milestones that we are glad to announce today and overall over 2024. Of course, the milestones and the go live haven't finished and won't be finished for this year. And this is just to give you an update and a brief overview of how the PMS API actually a message might look like, but I'm sure Andre will do much better work than what I'm sharing now. Just to give you an information for the National Competent Authority, the access to the product, to the API, so application programming interface, is not released yet. We are working and doing our best, and our goal is to release it by end of this year. The sooner the better, of course. So it depends by how the process, the progresses we're making in the API version to enable them to access the PMS API. For transparency, in particular for the future NCA user, we couldn't release along with the industry accesses this API connection for you, because as you know, the PMS product is sharing the same technology with UPD, and so the API. So there is the need to release a new API version that enables the human competent authorities to read only human medicinal products and not to read veterinary products. And as it now, with the current situation, the current API version, unfortunately, if you have access, if we grant you access to API, you will also be able to read the UPD data. And this is against paragraph 1 of Article 56 of the Regulation 2019-6. So that's why we are delaying slightly your access, but it will be for sure granted very soon. In the next slide, I will just give you a brief update on what we're talking about. So similarly to what you saw already in PUI, for those colleagues who have already been granted access and are already able to read data via the PUI, you will be able to see the same level of data also in API. Of course, the difference is that you can also see the non-centrally authorized products. So any product authorized as a DCP, MRP, or purely national authorized medicines. And the data that you see in API are equally the same data that are coming into PUI. Indeed, they are originated from SciMed2 and XCVMPD. I remind you all that SciMed2 is our EMA database. So we did a match and merge protocol for those centrally authorized products. They are coming between XCVMPD and also SciMed. All the data that are coming and are migrated and are constantly up to date in API are described in UEG Chapter 2, and the migration rules are reported in UEG Chapter 7. Most importantly for you to remind is that because we have a very high volume of data elements in comparison to XCVMPD, there will be around 80 fields, and most of them are repeatable, resulting empty. And because these are empty, there will be the need from your side, from the MAH, to submit and enrich the data as applicable. I say as applicable because there are some business rules that you need to follow, and not all the 80 fields might result compulsory for you to submit. Most importantly, also for the ESNP support, so for meeting the deadline on the 5th of February 2025, you know that the manufacturer resource is one of the key class that we are aiming to make available, and you will be able to see data already for CAPS only, of course. For NAPS, we do not have any data. For you to keep in mind is that this PMS API manufacturer resource is not in line with the latest draft version of UAG Chapter 2. So the version that you can access on the EMA web portal is currently the version before. We are working to an updated version that we aim to release in September, and this will contain also the updated manufacturer class sets of information, and most importantly, the relationships across the whole medicinal product data model in PMS. Last but not least, if you see the blue boxes, those are the PMS data available, so then you can access them. But if you see, of course, there are also the gray or partially gray boxes. These are data where we do not have information, and you can already get a flavor of how much you might be requested to be submitted as an enrichment process into PMS once we will be able to enable it. Last but not least, how to request a role. You might be already familiar with the types of roles that we have. So to be able to request access to PMS API, please remember take in mind that you always need to have first an IRIS PLM industry admin role. It doesn't require that you are exactly the administrator. You can also have one administrator from your organization, as long as this admin exists as a user role, I can approve your role. Once this is approved, you need to request the PMS industry API user. And in this case, this role is active and it's equal to UG Chapter 5, Level 2. For NCAs, instead, this role is not yet active. So if you attempt to access IAM, you will be noticing that there is no button called Request API Access because you have not yet been enabled as an NCA to access to access API. If you need any documentation or step-by-step guidance, you can always refer to UAG Chapter 1, Chapter 5 for the level of privileges, and please keep in mind that in API there is no limited privileges. Once you get access to API, you get access to the full data sets of information, including the commercially sensitive data. This is basically what I mentioned already. So you with the administration user role, you won't have a read access straight away, but you need to request a PMS API. you need to remember that you will, the very first admin role will be assigned by and approved by the EMA, while all the secondary requests of admin can also be approved by the very first nominated admin for an industry or NCA. We always recommend to have at least 2 administration users, and once you have been granted the role, you will be able to request your PMS industry API user. With that request that you can submit following the UAG Chapter 1 step-by-step guidance, you will be able to access PMS API, and Andrew will show you how, via including the client credential from API that will give you the access to the read PMS API only. This is simply the process that you might have saw already in our guidance. We will be updating because I want to make a few updates and clarification just for the sake of transparency for the user. And of course, as I mentioned, you need to make sure that you have an OMS record. Once you have an org ID being available, the second question that you need to ask yourself is whether you have an EMA user account. If no, please create it in IAM. If yes, you can submit your request as the industry admin role. And once this is approved, you will be able to see the button PMS, request PMS API access. And then you will be receiving by email a set of credentials that will allow you to connect to the PMS PUI. While the secondary, let's say the secondary step is just related to the PUI, and we gave it already in the previous presentation for you. Again, this is just a reminder for you where you can find the information. We will be sharing the presentation with all of you. We will be publishing, so you can click on the relevant link. And now I'll give the floor to my colleague, Andre, who will be demo the PMS API. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Idu. I'm the Spore Platform Architect from the EMA, and I will demo for you today the PMS API. Hope you can see my screen. So I am going to use for this demo a tool called Postman. It is a piece of software that allows us to access RESTful APIs through a user interface. I've set up here a collection of endpoints, the 2 endpoints that are available at this time for industry users to access on the PMS API. And in the Postman collection, I can configure the authorization approach. As defined in our documentation, we use the OAuth 2 standard, and the information required to configure this, whether in your software or if you want to do a manual test in a tool like Postman, the information needed to configure is included in an email that you receive when requesting the PMS API access. So that information will include a URL for the access token, a client ID, a client secret, and scope of the API. I've added here my test credentials, and I will generate a new access token. So this is a Java Web Token that is going to be used in the subsequent requests that I'm making to the API endpoints as per the OAuth 2 standard. The 2 endpoints that we exposed are the search product, that is endpoint 301, and get product full endpoint 304 from our API specification, which was originally released a few years ago. I will walk you through how to use the 2 different endpoints. So it is important to note the path that we need to use is the depending on the host name. Then we have a path of PMS API version 3, and we, of course, our API implements the FHIR standard. So the search endpoint is done on the main FHIR resource that we have, which is the medicinal product definition. And it is important to include the domain, so that is the human domain of products that we want to access. And from this request before, but I'm doing it now as well. So the API itself supports all the FHIR standard search criteria based off of the medicine product definition resource. I'm here searching just for human products. My response by default is in JSON, FHIR standard in JSON format. We can change that by switching the accept header, and we can also retrieve XML. The search endpoint gives us a FHIR bundle resource, which includes multiple search results. In this case, on the search endpoint, everything is of resource type medicine product definition. So as you can see here, I have a few results. And all the information related to a medicine product definition resource is included. So everything that in our implementation guide is mapped to this resource can be already visible through this endpoint. For getting all the information related to a specific product, we can use the get product full endpoint. And here we need to pass the ID, the PMS ID of a product. And that will allow us to retrieve the information. The path is, again, PMS API version 3 medicine product definition, the ID of the product, and then the modifier $everything. And this will give us, similar to the search endpoint, a response in the format of a FHIR bundle resource. And this is a bundle that includes the medicine product definition, the root of this product, but also every other FHIR resource related to this medicine product definition. So here we have packages and quite a few of them for this product. And then we would also have the authorization data, manufactured item information if available, administrable product definitions, so pharmaceutical product information, ingredients, and others. I was trying to see if I can find other types which are not package product definition. So, for example, here, ingredients, and so on. One more feature that I'd like to show you on the search endpoint. So my initial search was just for all the human products that this user is able to view as an industry user, marketing authorization holder of these products. We can also refine our search with other search criteria based on the FHIR format, as I mentioned. And I have here 2 examples. So we can search directly by identifiers within product definitions. And here I'm using a specific EV code of a product. And this search should return a specific product which contains that EV code. And there should be just that one entry. I can also search by more complex search criteria based off of the FHIR standard. So for example, this query parameter is looking for products which have a package authorization that has this identifier. So this marketing authorization number for a specific package or presentation. And again, I'm able to find one medicine product definition that has that information. If we look up the details, okay, it was exactly the same one. If you look up the details, then we should also be able to find the authorization information related to a specific package and with this authorization number. that is it in terms of demoing the API. Information about the OAuth 2 credentials to use for configuring your system or a tool like Postman, as well as which endpoints and what hostname to use are part of our documentation. So please view those for more information. And thank you very much. I think Marcos will take over now.
Yes, thank you, Andre. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? I hope so. I have just a couple of slides with some actions or say tips for the users. So Veronica has already explained that you have the different user roles, and then Andre has shown you a bit of a demo on how to use the API credentials and the different endpoints. So which are the next steps for applicants? First of all, you need to request, and some of you have already done this, you need to request the admin role for your organizations through IAM, and then you need to request the API credentials. Once you have these credentials and you are able to connect to the API, you will be able to start looking for your products, looking into the data, etc. So just as a reminder, only industry users can access the PMS API for now. We will be granting access later in this year for MCAs. So for the moment, it's only industry. If you log into the PMS API, you make a call for your products and you are not able to see your products, first of all, you need to make sure that your credentials are for the same org ID as the MA holders for the products that you are trying to look for. So if obviously the organization ID for your products is different than the credentials or the organization ID the credentials have been granted to, you won't be able to see any product. Therefore, you need to request the credentials for the correct organization ID. It is also important that you check, in case you don't see your products, that the mappings between XCDMPD and OMS are correct. That means that the organization that you have in XCDMPD as MA holder is the same or has a mapping to OMS. Otherwise, if this mapping is not correct, then the migration would have not worked, and therefore you are not able to see your products. Also, you need to make sure that the conditions that are explained in Chapter 7 are met for the initial migration. So in XCDMPD, your products should have an authorize those forms. They should be not nullified. You should have a legal basis. So if you are not meeting any of those conditions, you won't be able to see your products because we have not migrated them. So please make sure you have a look at the conditions. Then in XCDMPD, these conditions are met. And in any case, if you still have problems seeing your products or you have any question, you can always raise a ticket in ServiceNow, providing as much information as possible so we don't need to come back to you requesting more information, and we can close the ticket as soon as possible. In this slide, you have just a reminder of how to raise a ticket in ServiceNow. You have either an ask a question or report an incident. You have here the links. We will make these slides available after the webinar. So you can request for information or report an issue. Please make sure that you always select as service offering PMS and a service score. This way, we will receive the ticket and we will be able to check what's the problem, and we will be able to discuss with you if there is any problem with your product, or if you have not maybe requested the correct organization ID, credentials, etc. Which are the next steps in relation to PMS? So if you want to stay informed on the work that we do for PMS, please make sure that you attend the system quarter demos that we do. We have just made 2 weeks ago the last system demo for Q2, but then every quarter we continue making these demos as part of the agile way of working. Very important, we have the PMS webpage where you can find the overview of PMS, the EUIG implementation guide. So please have a look at the webpage where you have a lot of information. You also have the PLM portal where we have the forum and the PMS news page. Here we release release notes, the downtime, the different news. You can ask questions, etc. So please make sure you navigate through the PLM portal and you register through this news page. Moreover, if you have any question, you know we have the SMEs group together with industry and MCAs. So if there is anything that you would like to raise, you can always contact them and they will come back to us with your suggestions or issues, etc. Here you have a bit of a timeline on what are we going to do next in upcoming communications and engagements activities. So for example, in July, we will update Chapter 7 and Chapter 1. We have the PLM newsletter publication. We have different API trainings and Q&A sessions. Then August, we will continue updating sub-chapters. We will start with the go live of national products, so non-caps in the product UI. In principle, we will also be able to have the access for the API for MCAs, and we will have another training for the API, similar to the one that we have done today. Then for the rest of the year, we will be updating chapters and also the quarterly PLM newsletter publication, etc. So as upcoming these Q&A clinics, please, if you have any question in relation to the API and the product UI, we will be hosting 2 sessions for to be able to answer your questions on the 16th of July and the 23rd. So make sure to attend if you have any questions. We will be there to reply and to make sure that we are able to, reply to your questions if you have any. So further details, please, on this quarterly PLM newsletter, you can scan this QR code or to be able to subscribe to the newsletter. The next edition will be published next week, in mid of July. So make sure that you subscribe so you are always up to date with all the news that we have for PMS. You can also subscribe through this link once we make this presentation ready in the portal. With this, I come back to Katerina so we can reply to your questions. Most of them, I have been replying to most of your questions in Slido. So in case you don't have we don't have time to reply to all of them, you will be able to see the reply in Slido. But yeah, with that, I think, Katerina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Marcos. So let's start with our questions. First one. Without API, when users will be able to view NAP products through PY?
Well, I can reply. As I said, the idea is that we will be loading the non-caps products from September. So in the UI will be visible from September.
Yes, indeed. And we'll also talk about that in the newsletter, by the way. So next. How can you export full sets of data for medicinal products in a human-readable format? Performing checks directly in the user interface is not really practical.
I can also take this one. So in the we have received this question in other webinars as well. In the product UI, you have what we call the dynamic reports. And you are able to export a lot of information for your product there. So you can export all your pack sizes with MA numbers, authorization statuses. You can export as well manufacturers, different information. We have not made available a report where you can export all the data in an Excel format or CSV format. And for the moment, there is no plan to create such a report. So this is the only way that for the moment you have to review your data. It's either on the dynamic reports and export several information. It's a lot of information indeed what you can export. Or through the product UI, you can also view the rest of the fields, such as, I don't know, legal status of supply and some additional information. But most of it is already in the dynamic reports.
Thank you. Next, can we search medicinal product based on EV codes instead of PMS IDs?
I would say this is a question for Andre, but I'm already using this functionality, and I am able to search by EV codes, at least in Postman. So I would assume that you can make a similar call in your RIM system if you are connected to the PMS API.
Yes, indeed. And as I demoed, actually, one of my searches was based on EV code. You can use the identifier query parameter and pass the EV code value to that one, and that will allow us to search by it.
I just want to make here a clarification. You need to make sure that for caps, we have done the match and merge. So if the match and merge has not worked, then your EV code will not appear. But that doesn't mean that your product is not in PMS, because we have migrated the data from Siamet. We are working to solve this issue we have with the match and merge, but just as a caveat that for a cap, if you don't find your EV code, it doesn't mean that your product is not there. It's just that we have not done the match and merge.
Thank you. Can you may specifically share the data fields that are missing data from PMS? It would be helpful to know specifically without trying to work it out.
So as I have explained in the reply to this question, in chapter 7, you have a table at the end where you can find the source of information for each of the fields that we have in PMS. So you can see if a field is coming either from Siamet or from XVMPD, or it's empty because we don't have this information in none of the sources. So for example, the storage conditions is a field that is going to be always empty for the moment because we don't have this information nor in Siamet, neither in XVMPD. So with this table, you should be able to know if you should have data in PMS for your products or not. And that's, we cannot generalize for all the products because, I don't know, the orphan designation, it's coming from Siamet, but not for all the products, like only for those products with an orphan designation. So you need to understand, okay, orphan designation is coming from Siamet, so only for caps, but only for those caps where we have an orphan designation approved. And this is the way you need to understand this table.
Thank you. Next, will the timeline of February 2025 for critical medicines also be postponed due to the delayed availability of NAPs in the product UI from September instead of July?
No, because the fact that we are, let's say, late with the non-caps in the product UI doesn't affect any of the tasks that the applicant should do for the critical medicine. So for the moment, the task is submit pack sizes to XVMPD. On Thursday, we will have a webinar where we will be explaining and giving tips to applicants on how to do that. But the fact that this data is not in the product UI for the moment is not affecting anything. There is no task for you in the product UI. So no, there is no impact, no delay for the moment on any of these critical medicines activities.
Thank you. When will be the next release of PMS API?
For this, to be honest, I have no idea. Yeah, Veronica?
Maybe, Marcus, we can clarify to the audience that We don't have yet the date, otherwise we would have been very glad to announce it today. The reason is because we need to complete the technical analysis between the need to split the access for NCA human versus NCA vet. And to do so, these are will be running the next days until mid of July. So until I would say mid of July, we won't be able to announce any date, at least to have an understanding of when this can be deployed. So, but the agency usually informs always promptly. So as soon as we have this information, we'll share it.
Thank you. Should MAHs use PMS rather than XCVMPD to look at authorized product details?
It depends.
Well, for me, it's a no. So the data that you are submitting to XCVMPD should be equivalent to the data we have in PMS. The only difference is that in XCVMPD we have EV codes for the authorized dose form or the route of administration, while in PMS we have structured data coming from SPOR. So SMS IDs, RMS IDs, OMS IDs. The data should be the same. And also the structure of the product is a bit different because in XCVMPD you have one EV code per pack size, for example, while in PMS you have one medicinal product, and under the medicinal product the different pack sizes. So the data should be equivalent, it's just a different representation or a different way to represent the medicinal product. You should check XCVMPD because the pharmacovigilance fees are taken from XCVMPD, pharmacovigilance activities are still managed with XCVMPD data, etc. While, for example, if you need to open a variation for a cap, you will be using the data that we have in PMS. So it's not that you should now, move from XCVMPD to PMS and just check PMS. You need to control both sources and make sure that the data that you have is equivalent in both platforms. So I think it's not rather one or the other, but make sure that the data is aligned in both systems.
Okay, thank you. Could you please clarify the meaning of PMS data are accessible to the general public mentioned in slide 6? Which data are available for the general public?
So I can take this question. I posted also the link so you can have access straight away to the public report. It's basically a very limited data sets of information. For the moment, only CAFs because those are hosted in the PLM portal. If you click on the link, these are based on Annex A of UG Chapter 5, and it's basically information like PMS ID, dose forms, or active ingredients, and MAH, very general information, which are in the public domain. So you can have access to the link and see also from there.
Thank you. At this stage, is the PMS API to be used as a reference tool for MAHs to view their product information, and at a later stage, MAHs will be instructed to update PMS?
So yes and no. You can use the PMS API to view your product data, and at a later stage, you will be using the PMS API as well to update, enrich this data that we have in PMS. But you also have the product user interface where you can also see your products, and in the future, you will be able to update and enrich the PMS data. So it's not that the PMS API is the reference tool. If you don't have access to the PMS API, there is no problem. You can still use the product UI. So yeah, it's either one or the other to have access to your data and in the future to update this information.
Thank you. Is PMS data fields numbering in line with IDMP data field numbering? We have noticed anomalies. Is this because PMS API and IDMP Chapter 2 are not aligned? When will IDMP Chapter 2 be updated?
So I'll take this question. I don't really understand what do you mean for data fields number. If you mean the adders numbering in UG Chapter 2 versus the ISO DMP standards, I can tell you these are not aligned. So we're using our numbering, but it's just a matter of the way we describe the documents. Regarding the next release of UG Chapter 2, as Marcos mentioned, we are aiming to release it by September, and it's right after the public system demo that is scheduled.
Thank you. One of the tasks we have is to verify the correctness of PMS data. The delay in releasing NAPs via PY has a significant impact on this task.
Correct, but we have not given a deadline to complete these tasks to MA holders. So this is a continuous exercise you need to perform, and we have not given any deadline for this task. So we understand that there is a delay. So you will get access to the non-cap data a bit later through the product UI, but again, no problem. We don't foresee any issue here. Also, for the variation for non-caps, then this has an impact because you're going to start submitting your variation forms a bit later. But then, therefore, the optional use and the mandatory use of the variation form will be delayed if the access is granted a bit later. So, if this is in relation to the ESMP tasks, again, we don't foresee any issue here.
Thank you. You've replied to my first question that it's impossible to export full sets of data in a human-readable way. Are we supposed to use dynamic reports to export chunks of data and then combine them manually so we can perform checks in Excel?
So
this is for PY.
Yes.
Do you want to take over?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. How can I reply to this? So, in principle, yes, that's the way to go forward. The thing is, in the product UI and in the dynamic reports, we have not created a report where you are able to export all the data for a specific medicinal product. What we have done is we have prioritized specific sections like manufacturers, pack sizes, and some information that is useful, but not the full data set of elements that we have in PMS. So the answer is that for the moment, yes, you might need to combine or validate a specific sections for a specific product for the moment. We might need to prioritize maybe a report where you can export additional information, but I would say it's impossible to create a report with almost 200 fields per product and with all the relationships between the different sections, the manufacturers with ingredients, with pack sizes. It would be an impossible report to manage, and that's why we have not prioritized a report like this for the moment. So the only way that we have for the moment is either those reports or go to the product UI and check the information that you have in the product UI, or through the PMS API to export the full XML and then work with the XML or the JSON file to validate this information.
Thank you. Next, will there also be a demo or test system, test API, available where you can try out PMS read and write functions without corrupting productive data?
Yes, so we are working on a strategy to create a test environment so applicants can connect to the test environment and play and train on how to submit data to PMS. We are working on this strategy, and for the moment, we cannot provide additional information on that. For the read API, we don't have a test environment. It's only production. There is no risk that you can write data there. So that's why we only have access to production. But as we will be opening in the future the API write capabilities, we will also provide access to a test environment so applicants can train and play on how to submit data and update data in PMS.
Thank you. Is the usage of PMS API mandatory for industry? Is API connection more beneficial for SME or for large companies?
So no, it's not mandatory at all. We have just provided the capability to connect to the PMS API, but we have also provided the capability to connect to PMS through the product UI that is in the PLM portal. Now, I would say it's not a task of EMA to say to whom is more beneficial. That would depend on the company and how they manage their data. So small and medium enterprises can use a RIM system to connect to PMS or use the product UI. And the same for large companies. There might be large companies connecting to PMS through the API or through the product UI. This is for each of the companies and sponsors, semi-holders, etc., to decide how they want to connect to PMS. But the PMS API is not mandatory. You have other ways to connect to PMS and in the future to update the data, etc.
Thank you. Do I need to request the API user role for each OMS? If I am a generic company, I have products for multiple MAHs. I assume the sending needs to reflect the API role for the respective OMS ID. Will products be rejected if not?
So the access to PMS API is granted based on the org ID. So if you're working for more than one org ID, you will be requesting and fulfilling the templates in IAM, because there is a functionality as explained in chapter 1, request PMS API, and you need to fulfill that template specifying the org ID. Now, I don't remember, I need Andre, maybe if you can complement my answer, if in this template they should be populating one by one to request the secret credential, I think so, or if you can enter multiple org IDs in the same templates. If you can just clarify this, would be great.
Yes, Veronica. So the current access model is per org ID, and there needs to be a request made for each org ID.
Okay.
That is the current model. Of course, we're open for feedback, and we will. I'll take this as a note for looking at what possibilities we have to allow this kind of users to have a simpler process.
Thank you, Andre. And regarding the second part of the question, whether the product will be rejected or not, we are not opening PMS for the moment for the submission of PMS product entity. To create a product entity, you still need to use XVMPD, so this is reflected correctly into PMS. So for the moment, this role doesn't imply that.
Okay, thank you. So just 1 second before we continue, just wanted to let you know we've opened a short survey, as always, just to get your feedback on the session. So if you can respond, it will be very useful for us in checking if this session was useful to you and effective in making you understand how to use PMS API. Okay, so back to the questions. Please, can you share the Postman project with us? Of course, no secrets.
Andre, I think this is for you. Too technical.
Yes, we can publish the collection. That was the plan.
Okay. Perfect. What we need to do if XVMPD code is not populated for our product in PMS UI?
So this is me for me. So for the moment, wait, because we have a bug that is preventing us to do this match and merge. So in principle, this will only happen for centrally authorized products, because for non-caps, we are taking this data directly from XCDMPD. But for caps, as we also have SIAMED data, for some products, we have not been able to do this match and merge of products. So, and there is a bug that is preventing us to have this match and merge. We are working on that, and we will also make the necessary steps to have this match and merge. Once we have solved this issue, we will send a communication and we will let you know, hey, now you can check. And if there is anything missing, you can raise a ticket, and we will make sure that for those products that are still missing, we run the necessary activities. But for the moment, you need to wait until we solve this small bug that we have, and then we will communicate and we will let you know what to do next.
Thank you. Can API be installed to our RIMS via vendor? What are the requirements? Both vendor and MAH certificates and credentials required, or can we have just provide our org ID to get the API access and integrate with RIMS?
So, yeah, please.
No, go. I mean,
no, I was thinking the vendor can get access if you're working on behalf of an org ID. So first you need to be granted a role from the company's admin. So in this way, you can request the PMS API credential and access. So in this case, you can do that. Then for the second question, I don't know, Marcus, if you had you wanted to.
Well, I would say that depends on each vendor and how they are connected to the PMS API. What you need to have is this credential, so you can connect to the PMS API. And once you are able to connect, then it depends on each vendor how this connection is performed. I think here we cannot really provide any feedback.
Okay, I think we can have a last question. Is this possible to view data via API without connecting to any RIMS tool or machine?
I think that's an interesting question. So if you just download Postman and use it as Andre has shown, you can access the PMS API and you can retrieve the XMLs or the JSON files. So this is the way you can connect, I would say. But you will just have these files. It's not really nice to read, and you might need to have a tool that converts these XML and JSON files into something that is more readable by a human. But anyway, you can have access to, I would say, this way to the PMS API.
Okay, maybe really lastly, can we address this concern not to have a possibility to export all data?
Okay, I think it's clear. It's been raised in all the webinars. We can try to see if we can do something else on the reports, but we will need to check how can we prioritize this. So it's something that we take because it's a comment that we have received in a lot of webinars. I would assume it's the same company or person, but maybe there is more people with this need. So yeah, we accept this, and yeah, we take this comment into account.
Okay, so our time is over now, so we will close the Q&A. But as you saw, most of the questions have written replies, and we will also check the missing ones. And in general, we are working on an FAQ for PMS, where we will try to condensate all the most frequently asked questions. And yeah, for those who are interested in pack sizes submissions through XCDMPD, please join our webinar on the 11th of July, so next Thursday at 10 a.m. You can find all details on EMA website. And over to you, Marcos and Veronica, for closing.
Just thank you very much for the interest in joining PMS and connecting to API. So we hope to see you at the next webinars that we set up for July. Thank you very much for everybody and have a good rest of the day.